When nurse Sarah Cooper took the job caring for a millionaire in a vegetative state, she thought his silence was the mystery, until she realized someone in the mansion needed him to stay that way. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Sarah Cooper tightened her grip on the worn leather handle of her suitcase as the wrought iron gates of the Thompson estate glided open without a sound. The mansion beyond stood like a monument to old money, its stone facade bathed in the gray light of a winter afternoon. Neatly trimmed hedges lined the winding path, their precision almost unsettling, as if the grounds were as closely controlled as the household within. A stern-faced butler named James greeted her, his bow more mechanical than polite. "Mrs. Thompson awaits you in the study," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. Sarah followed him through the grand corridors, where oil portraits of unsmiling ancestors seemed to watch her every step. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something older, like dust hiding beneath the polished surfaces. Alicia Thompson sat poised behind a mahogany desk, every inch the image of elegance. Her dark hair was coiled perfectly at the nape of her neck, and her jewelry whispered of wealth with each subtle movement. Her eyes assessed Sarah, not with curiosity, but with the cold calculation of someone appraising a product. "Miss Cooper, I expect nothing but the utmost professionalism," Alicia said, her voice as cool as the marble floor. "My husband requires constant and specific care. Any failure will not be tolerated." Sarah nodded, her practiced smile unwavering. "I understand, Mrs. Thompson. You can rely on me." Alicia's lips curved into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "James will show you to your quarters and Alex's room. You have Sundays off, 8 to 8. No exceptions." The tour through the mansion was brief and devoid of small talk. Sarah's room was modest but comfortable, a sharp contrast to the lavish surroundings. The door to Alex's room opened with a soft click, revealing a space dominated by a hospital bed surrounded by advanced medical equipment. Machines beeped softly, displaying his vital signs, a steady rhythm in the otherwise still room. Alex Thompson lay motionless, his once strong frame now a shadow of its former self. Photographs on the dresser showed him horseback riding, laughing at a party, holding a sleek Russian blue cat. His eyes were closed, his expression peaceful but distant, as if lost somewhere far beyond the walls of his own home. James recited Alex's care routine with precision, his tone practiced. Sarah listened intently, but her attention kept drifting to Alex's face. There was something about him, something that made her believe he was still in there, waiting. As she unpacked her things that night, a sense of unease settled over her. The mansion was too quiet, its silence thick and heavy. She heard no distant chatter, no clatter of dishes, only the muffled hum of the machines keeping Alex alive. When she finally lay in bed, the full moon cast silver fingers through the window, painting shadows on the walls. Sarah stared at the ceiling, the echo of Alicia's warning still fresh in her mind. Beneath the layers of wealth and beauty, something else lurked in the Thompson estate. And as the clock ticked past midnight, Sarah knew one thing for certain. Her new job would be nothing like she had expected. The Thompson estate seemed to hold its breath at night. The mansion's long corridors, pristine by day, transformed into shadowy tunnels that swallowed sound. Sarah Cooper moved quietly through the halls, the soles of her white nursing shoes muffled by thick Persian rugs. She had just finished her evening routine with Alex, checking vitals, adjusting the machines, and speaking softly to him, hoping that somewhere beneath the veil of his coma, he could hear her. She turned off the bedside lamp, leaving only the dim glow of medical monitors to paint the room in cool blue. Just as she reached for the door, a sound froze her in place, a soft, melodic tune, almost a whisper. Her fingers tightened around the doorknob as she strained to listen. The music seemed to drift through the walls, like a lullaby sung to empty air. Her pulse quickened. The sound was unmistakably from an old record player, the kind with a slight crackle beneath the melody. but she hadn't seen any record players in the house. She slipped into the hallway, following the music like a thread in the dark. The sound led her through the maze of rooms and into a study at the far end of the east wing. The door was ajar, and as she pushed it open, the music swelled, a haunting piano piece, notes dripping with melancholy. On a polished wooden table sat a vintage record player, its needle gliding smoothly over a spinning vinyl. Sarah stepped closer, her breath fogging in the cold air. She could see dust clinging to the edges of the room, undisturbed, yet the record played as if someone had just set it in motion. A shiver traced her spine. She reached out and lifted the needle, and the room fell silent. Her own breathing seemed too loud. The study was filled with artifacts of Alex's past, books on business and equestrian sports, awards, and framed photographs. She picked up a photo of a younger Alex, standing beside a sleek gray cat with piercing blue eyes. His smile was broad and genuine. When she turned to leave, something caught her eye, a small music box on the desk, its lid slightly open. She twisted the tiny key, and the box played the same melody as the record. She felt a rush of cold. How had the record player turned on by itself, playing the exact same tune? The air in the room seemed to thicken. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Her hand trembled as she set the music box down and hurried back to Alex's room. The machines continued their rhythmic hum, Alex's chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. She stood over him, studying his face, searching for a sign. "Alex, if you can hear me, give me something. Anything." Silence. Sarah sank into the chair beside his bed, exhaustion pulling at her. She thought of the music box, and the way the mansion seemed to breathe around her. The logical part of her mind grasped for explanations. Perhaps the player had a timer, perhaps the staff had been cleaning and left it on. But beneath her rationalizations, fear gnawed at her resolve. Something was wrong in this house. She could feel it in the way shadows pooled in corners and how the walls seemed to listen. As sleep dragged her under, the melody played softly in her mind, each note a question unanswered. The days at the Thompson estate blurred into a steady rhythm of care and routine, but the house itself remained a mystery. Each corridor seemed to lead somewhere new, and Sarah often caught herself turning corners only to find the same painting staring back at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching, shifting just out of sight. One afternoon, as Sarah walked through the garden to clear her mind, she heard a soft rustling beneath a cluster of rose bushes. She knelt down, parting the thorny branches, and found a pair of blue eyes staring back at her. A sleek, silver-gray cat lay curled in the shadow, its fur damp from the dewy grass. "Hey, little one," she whispered, extending her hand slowly. The cat didn't flinch, only blinked with a measured calm. Sarah gently coaxed it out, revealing a healthy, well-fed feline. It was no stray. Its coat was too clean, its manner too composed. A small collar hung loosely around its neck, but the tag had been worn smooth. She scooped the cat into her arms, its body warm against the chill of the late afternoon. It purred softly, a sound that felt almost soothing. "You must belong to someone," she murmured, carrying it inside. When she brought the cat into Alex's room, the machines monitoring his vitals flickered slightly. Sarah frowned, but the cat squirmed in her arms, leaping gracefully onto the bed beside Alex. To her surprise, the cat curled up next to him, its tail wrapping around its body as it began to purr deeply. The monitors reacted. The heart rate spiked briefly, and Alex's eyelids twitched. Sarah's pulse quickened. She leaned closer, brushing a lock of hair from Alex's forehead. "Alex, can you hear me?" The room remained still, but the moment felt charged. She didn't move the cat. Instead, she allowed it to stay, hoping its presence might reach a part of Alex lost in the darkness of his coma. She named the cat Blue for its striking eyes and began bringing it to his room regularly. Each time, Alex's responses seemed stronger. A finger twitch, a shift in breathing, the faintest movement beneath closed lids. Alicia Thompson noticed the cat during one of her rare visits to the room. Her expression hardened, lips pressed into a thin line. "Where did that come from?" she asked, voice brittle. "He just showed up in the garden." "I thought he might be Alex's," Sarah explained, maintaining an even tone. Alicia's gaze never left the cat. "Alex had a cat once. It disappeared shortly after his accident." Her voice was flat, devoid of sentiment. "It's probably a stray. I don't want it in the house." Sarah hesitated. "But he seems to respond to it." His vitals improve when Blue is around. Alicia's expression shifted, a shadow passing over her features. I pay you to follow orders, Miss Cooper, not to experiment with my husband's care. She turned sharply, leaving the room without waiting for a response. The door clicked shut, and Blue opened his eyes, unblinking. Sarah stroked his fur, her mind racing. There was something about this cat, something more than coincidence. She would keep Blue close, even if it meant defying Alicia. That night, as the mansion settled into its uneasy slumber, Sarah sat with Blue beside Alex's bed. The cat's rhythmic purring filled the room, a soft counterpoint to the machines. Sarah whispered stories of hope and recovery, and as the clock struck midnight, she could have sworn she saw Alex's lips move, as if trying to speak through the veil of silence that bound him. Sarah had learned the mansion's rhythms, the subtle creaks of the floorboards, the sigh of old pipes, the way shadows stretched and curled around corners. Most of the staff moved like ghosts, quiet and purposeful, their eyes never lingering. Only James, the butler, spoke more than a few words to her, though even his conversations were clipped and cautious. On a cold afternoon, while the sky hung heavy with impending rain, Sarah decided to explore. She had been feeling increasingly trapped in the routine of Alex's care, her world shrinking to the confines of his room and the clinical beep of machines. She wandered deeper into the West Wing, an area of the house few ever entered. The hallway here was different, darker, with fewer windows. The portraits on the walls were older, the faces more severe. She moved past closed doors, each handle tarnished with age. One door at the end of the corridor drew her attention. Unlike the others, its handle gleamed, polished and new. When she tested it, the knob refused to turn. Locked. A flicker of curiosity turned into a spark. Why would one door be locked in a house that otherwise held no secrets? At least not openly. She leaned in, pressing her ear to the wood. Silence. She knocked softly, the sound swallowed by the thick air. What are you doing? Sarah jolted back, her pulse racing. James stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable. His sudden appearance was as if he had materialized from the shadows. I was just looking around, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I got a bit turned around. This wing is not in use, he said, his voice low. Mrs. Thompson prefers it remain closed. Sarah glanced at the door again. What's inside? James hesitated. His lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, she thought he might confide in her. Instead, he stepped forward, his posture shifting from passive to imposing. If you value your position here, Miss Cooper, you'll respect the rules of the house. She opened her mouth to protest, but the look in his eyes silenced her. It wasn't anger, it was fear. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his footsteps swallowed by the carpet. Back in her room, Sarah couldn't shake the image of the locked door. She turned the events over in her mind, pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. When she asked the other staff about it, they quickly changed the subject, their faces turning pale. One maid, a girl no older than 20, muttered something about bad luck before scurrying away. That night, the mansion seemed to breathe around her, its old bones creaking. She sat by Alex's bed, Blue nestled in her lap. The cat purred softly, its blue eyes reflecting the dim light. Alex, she whispered, brushing her fingers over his hand. What's behind that door? His face remained impassive, but the heart monitor gave a soft beep, a slight shift in rhythm. Her skin prickled. She leaned closer as if he might respond. The music box on the dresser began to play. The same haunting melody she had heard before. She hadn't touched it. Her breath caught, and Blue's purring stopped abruptly. The room seemed to close in on her, the air thick and still. Sarah stood, moving slowly toward the box. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and snapped the lid shut. Silence. She turned back to Alex, half expecting to see his eyes open, his lips moving. But he lay still, a statue in a house full of secrets. And somewhere, beyond the locked door, something waited. The following days at the Thompson estate unfolded under a shroud of unease. Sarah moved through her duties with practiced calm, but the memory of the locked door lingered like a splinter beneath the skin. She felt the weight of it in every silent hallway and every sidelong glance from the staff. The house itself seemed to hum with secrets, its walls too eager to listen. One afternoon, while dusting the shelves in Alex's room, Sarah's elbow brushed against a framed photograph. It toppled to the floor, the glass shattering with a delicate, crystalline sound. She knelt quickly, murmuring an apology to the empty room, and began gathering the shards. As she lifted the frame, a folded piece of paper slipped from behind the photograph. Her breath caught. The photo had shown Alex at a garden party, his arm around Alicia, both smiling under a sunlit sky. But the note hidden behind it felt like a relic of another life. She unfolded the yellowing paper with care. The handwriting was bold, slanted, and unmistakably Alex's. Asterisk, my dearest Emily. I wish things were different. If only I had the strength to choose love over duty. You were the light in those dark days, and my heart aches with the choices I've made. Please find happiness far from here, far from me. I will always love you. Alex. Sarah's pulse quickened. Emily. The name was unfamiliar, unspoken in the house where Alicia's name reigned. She read the note again, each word heavy with regret and love. Who was Emily, and what had happened to her? She tucked the note into her pocket just as footsteps approached. James appeared in the doorway, his face as expressionless as ever. His eyes fell to the broken glass. An accident, she explained quickly. I'll clean it up. He nodded but did not leave. His gaze lingered on the photo, and for the first time, Sarah thought she saw something flicker in his expression, sorrow, perhaps, or fear. Did you know her? She asked, testing the air between them. Who? His reply was too quick. Emily. James' jaw tightened. His hands, always folded neatly behind his back, clenched at his sides. You should not ask questions, Miss Cooper. This house has rules for a reason. What happened to her? Sarah pressed, the note burning against her thigh through the fabric of her pocket. Did she leave? Was she? Enough. His voice cut through the room, sharp as a blade. Emily was a nurse. Like you. She cared for Mr. Thompson before his accident. Then she left. Sarah took a step forward. Left? Or disappeared? James turned, his face now a mask of stone. Mind your place, Miss Cooper. The past is not your concern. He left without another word, his footsteps swallowed by the mansion's quiet. Alone again, Sarah sank into the chair by Alex's bed. The machines hummed steadily, and Blue, the ever-watchful cat, leapt onto her lap. She ran her fingers through his soft fur, the letter crumpled in her fist. Alex, she whispered, as if he might break his silence. Did you love her? Did they take her from you? The room held its breath. The shadows along the walls seemed to deepen, pooling like ink. The locked door, the strange music, Alicia's cold eyes. Everything pointed to a truth buried beneath layers of lies. When Sarah closed her eyes, she saw a young woman's face, someone lost and forgotten. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Emily's story was far from over. Sarah's days at the Thompson estate became a balancing act between caregiving and quiet investigation. Each soft step she took through the winding halls felt like walking a tightrope, and every curious glance was a risk. The staff had grown colder, their responses clipped, and even James seemed to watch her with a wary eye. Yet Sarah couldn't stop digging, couldn't shake the feeling that the truth lay just beneath the mansion's polished surface. Her sessions with Alex became more experimental. She brought in sensory items, lavender sachets, a soft blanket with a texture she imagined he might recognize, and most importantly, music. She played the haunting melody from the music box on an old portable speaker. The machines monitoring his vitals reacted, spikes and subtle shifts, as if Alex's mind stirred at the sound. One afternoon, while the melody played, Blue, the silver cat, curled up on Alex's chest, his purring synchronized with the soft rhythm of the heart monitor. Sarah sat beside the bed, speaking gently. Alex, it's me, Sarah. If you can hear me, try to move. Show me you're still here. His fingers twitched. Just a fraction, but enough to steal her breath. She leaned closer, her voice a fragile thread. Again, Alex. You can do this. The room held its breath. His hand moved, slow and deliberate, his fingers brushing the blanket. The monitors responded, a gentle crescendo of beeps. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, a mix of joy and fear. But the moment was interrupted. The door swung open, and Alicia swept in, her presence sucking the warmth from the room. Her expression shifted as she saw Sarah, her gaze dropping to Alex's hand still resting where he had moved it. "What are you doing?" Alicia's voice was sharp, the question more accusation than inquiry. Sarah stood, steadying her nerves. "I'm working with Alex's motor responses. He's showing signs of improvement." Alicia's eyes narrowed. "Improvement? His doctors said that was impossible. You shouldn't be experimenting on him." "It's not an experiment," Sarah argued. "I've been using sensory therapy, music, and tactile stimulation. His responses are real." "Enough." Alicia's voice turned cold. "You were hired to maintain his condition, not to play doctor. I won't have you giving anyone false hope. He's your husband." Sarah's voice rose, her frustration slipping through. "Don't you want him to wake up?" A shadow crossed Alicia's face, a flicker of something dark. "Mr. Thompson's care is none of your concern, Miss Cooper. Do your job, or I'll find someone who will." She turned on her heel and left, the door clicking shut behind her. The room seemed to exhale, and Sarah sank back into the chair, her hands trembling. She knew then that Alicia was hiding something more than fear of false hope. It was as if Alex's recovery threatened her, as if waking him might unravel her world. Determined, Sarah continued her therapy in secret. She brought in scents from Alex's past, fresh-cut grass, leather from an old riding glove, even the cologne she found tucked away in his wardrobe. Each time, his reactions grew stronger. One evening, Sarah sat beside him, Blue purring at the foot of the bed. She played a recording of a horse's gentle whinny, its hooves clopping softly on gravel. Alex's lips parted, a faint, hoarse sound escaping, a sigh, a breath, a whisper. "Alex!" Her voice was barely more than a gasp. She leaned in, her ear close to his lips. "Say it again." The machines beeped in time with his breathing. His eyelids fluttered, and his fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. Then, in the quiet, she heard it, a word weak but clear. "Emily." Sarah's blood ran cold. The name, spoken from a place deep within his fractured mind, was a crack in the facade. She knew now that Emily's story was not a ghost story, but a real one, woven into the walls of this house and the silence of the man before her. The truth lay just beyond that locked door, and with Alex waking, the secrets of the Thompson estate were beginning to unravel. The Thompson estate had always been a place of whispers, but now it seemed to pulse with them. Ever since Alex had spoken Emily's name, Sarah couldn't shake the sense that the house itself was pressing in on her, urging her toward the truth. She became more cautious, each step through the grand corridors measured, every conversation with the staff veiled. Alicia's presence loomed over everything, a shadow that grew darker with each sign of Alex's recovery. Determined to find answers, Sarah turned to the only person who might know more, James. She caught him alone in the kitchen late one night, his usually composed demeanor cracking as he poured himself a stiff drink. The clink of glass against the counter was the only sound in the room. "James," she started softly, careful not to startle him. "I need to know about Emily." His hand stilled, the amber liquid sloshing in the glass. "This isn't safe, Miss Cooper. You're treading on dangerous ground. She was a nurse here, wasn't she? She cared for Alex before me." James set the glass down, his fingers white-knuckled. "Yes. Emily was kind. Too kind. She believed she could help him, just like you. But when she got too close to the truth, she disappeared." "What truth?" He hesitated, his eyes searching hers as if weighing the risk of speaking. Finally, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope, its edges worn. "You need to see this." Inside was a copy of Alex's will, dated just weeks before his accident. Sarah's eyes widened as she read the contents. Nearly all of Alex's wealth was to go to charity, with only a modest sum left to Alicia. The bulk of his estate, including the Thompson business empire, was to be placed in a foundation to support neurological research, a project he and Emily had been working on together. "But this changes everything," Sarah whispered. "If Alex wakes up, Alicia loses everything," James finished, his voice heavy. "I believe she knew about this. Alex had planned to announce his new will at a charity event, but the accident happened before he could. After that, Alicia took control. She shut down the foundation plans and dismissed most of the staff. Emily, she started asking questions, and then she was gone." Sarah's mind raced. "And Alex's accident? Do you think it was?" "Not an accident." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Alex had no history of medical issues. He was strong, healthy. But one night, after a private dinner with Alicia, he collapsed. The doctors found a drug in his system, something that could induce a coma. Alicia claimed he had taken it accidentally, a mix-up with his medication. But I never believed it." A chill ran through Sarah. "Why didn't you say anything?" "There was no proof. Alicia controlled everything, the doctors, the reports, even the staff. Those who questioned her were dismissed. I stayed because someone needed to watch over him. To wait for someone like you." She felt the weight of his words settle over her. Everything made sense: the locked door, the coldness in Alicia's gaze, the fear that hung over the staff like a cloud. Alex had been silenced, and those who could speak for him had been removed. "What's behind the locked door, James?" His expression darkened. "Emily's room. She had been living here when she disappeared. Alicia sealed it off, told the staff it was to preserve her memory. But I think there's more to it. I've heard sounds, soft crying, the music box playing on its own. Some say it's haunted, but I think it's Alicia. She keeps it locked as a reminder, or maybe as a warning." Sarah stood, resolve hardening within her. "We need to get in there. There could be evidence, something that proves what really happened." James reached into his pocket and handed her a small, tarnished key. "I've kept this all these years, hoping it might one day be needed. But be careful. Alicia is more dangerous than you know." With the key in her hand and the weight of the truth pressing down on her, Sarah knew the path forward was treacherous. But with Alex showing signs of waking and the will hidden no longer, the lies surrounding the Thompson estate were beginning to unravel. And Sarah was ready to face whatever lay behind that locked door, even if it meant exposing the darkest corners of a house built on secrets. Sarah clutched the tarnished key in her hand, its metal cool and heavy with promise. The hallway to the locked door stretched before her, the carpet muffling her footsteps as the mansion seemed to draw a deep, silent breath. Shadows clung to the corners, and every creak of the old wood underfoot set her nerves on edge. She moved swiftly, knowing she had only a narrow window of time. Alicia had left for a charity event in town, a public show of grace and philanthropy, while the truth lay hidden within her own walls. When Sarah reached the door, she paused, her fingers brushing the polished doorknob. She slid the key into the lock, the mechanism groaning as if waking from a long slumber. The door opened with a soft hiss of air, stale and untouched. Inside, the room was frozen in time. Dust motes drifted lazily through the narrow beam of light that slipped through the heavy drapes. A bed sat neatly made, its quilt an old-fashioned floral pattern. On the nightstand, the music box stood, its lid half open as if someone had left in a hurry. Sarah wound it cautiously, the haunting melody filling the room, the same song that had echoed through the halls at night. The walls were lined with photographs. Some were of Alex, his smile vibrant, his arm around a young woman with gentle eyes, Emily. Others showed the two of them at a charity event, standing by the construction site of what looked like a clinic or research center. These were dreams that had never come to pass. She opened the small desk drawer, her hands moving carefully through old letters and notebooks. Many were written in Emily's hand, detailed logs of Alex's condition, notes about her therapy sessions, and plans for the foundation they had intended to build. The last entry was different. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged. Asterisk, I've found the documents. She'll do anything to stop him. I need to tell someone before it's too late. Sarah's heart pounded. Emily had discovered the truth, about the will, about Alicia's plans. And then she had vanished. The evidence here was enough to reopen the investigation, to bring the truth to light. She heard a sound, a soft scrape behind her. The door was ajar, a shadow filling the frame. Alicia stood there, her face a mask of calm, but her eyes sharp and cold. "What are you doing in here?" Alicia's voice was smooth, too smooth. Sarah held the notebook to her chest. "I know what you did. To Alex. To Emily." Alicia stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "You don't understand. Everything I did was to protect what's mine." "Protect?" Sarah's voice trembled with anger. "You drugged your own husband. You silenced Emily when she found out." Alicia's lips curled into a smirk. "She was a meddler, just like you. I gave Alex everything, my youth, my loyalty. And then he wanted to throw it all away on Charity and that woman." Sarah took a step back. "He loved her, didn't he? She wasn't just his nurse." Alicia's expression hardened. "She was nothing, and she remains nothing. No one missed her. No one came looking. You think you can change that now." But before Sarah could respond, a new sound filled the room, a weak, rasping voice. "Emily." Both women turned. Standing in the doorway, propped against the frame, was Alex. His eyes were open, bloodshot but alive, his hand gripping the wood for balance. He looked at Alicia, his face a mask of betrayal. "What have you done?" Alicia's composure shattered. You're supposed to be asleep." "You're not supposed to." She backed away, her movements jerky, as if the ground had turned to quicksand. Sarah moved to Alex's side, supporting him as his strength faltered. "It's over, Alicia. The truth is out." "No." Alicia lunged forward, her hand reaching for the music box. In one swift motion, she hurled it against the wall, the melody distorting into a discordant crash. She stumbled back, the room closing in on her as if the walls themselves were rejecting her. Minutes later, James and the staff rushed in, drawn by the noise. The truth unraveled quickly: Sarah's evidence, Alex's testimony, the hidden will. The police were called, and Alicia was led away, her once regal bearing reduced to a hollow shell. In the days that followed, Alex's recovery progressed rapidly. The will was reinstated, and the plans for the neurological foundation were revived. Sarah remained by his side, not just as his nurse but as a friend, someone who had fought to bring him back. The Thompson estate underwent a transformation, its dark corners brightened by new life and purpose. Where shadows had once lingered, light now streamed through open windows. Alex dedicated a wing of the new clinic to Emily's memory, ensuring her name would never be forgotten again. And as spring bloomed, the garden filled with color, and Sarah often found herself sitting there with Blue curled on her lap, the cat's blue eyes a reminder that some souls never truly left. The mansion was no longer a house of secrets, but a home built on truth, healing, and the promise of new beginnings. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.